Good evening, everyone. My name is Darshan Doshi. I'm the founding director for the Flame Center for Entrepreneurship and Innovation. Today, we have a fantastic session for you. Why are large companies interested in startups? And I'll speak a little bit more about the topic, but before we do, Founders Talk webinar series was started to have a discussion around startups, innovation, corporate entrepreneurship, family business, transitioning, investing in startups. So all things entrepreneurship. That is why we've started Founders Talk series. It happens every Wednesday and Saturday, 5 p.m. to 6 p.m., where we bring people from around the globe who have built their businesses or on corporate side are working with startups or investors or family business entrepreneurs themselves, right? We have a lot of educators who may have done a lot of research around entrepreneurship. And so today we have a session which is focused towards corporate innovation, if I may call this, right? And on the flip side of it is how can startups engage with large companies? Why should they engage? At what point should they engage? What can they get out of it? And then most importantly, if they've decided to engage with large companies, how do they do it, right? And so the whole idea around why should a company as large as Reliance Industries we have many other examples, including Amazon, Google. Most of the large companies abroad have some sort of an engagement going on with startups. So today, I'm very fortunate to have Amay Mashilkar, a friend, a former colleague, and most importantly, he's been someone who's helped me and advised me extensively, right? So I'm very fortunate for that. So thanks a lot for joining us today, Amay. What we're going to do today is Amay is going to walk us through a quick presentation on this topic. And then if you can share your questions who are in attendance in the Q&A box at the bottom, I'll pull those questions and Amay can help answer those questions for us. And then right at the end, the whole idea is we'll try to cover as many questions as we can, but if we can't, then we'll try to come back to you to answer those questions for you. Another quick announcement is we've launched a one-year postgraduate program in entrepreneurship and innovation. It's for aspiring entrepreneurs, next generation family business entrepreneurs. Applications are open. You can find more details in the chat window if you can take a look at it. We will begin the program next month, so we'll close the application soon. So if anyone is interested, please ask them to reach out to us. Now, with further ado, I'd like to introduce Amay Mashilkar. Amay is the head of GeoGenNext. GeoGenNext is the startup initiative of Reliance Industries. It has been in operation for over almost 6 years now, right? And over the 6 years, it has helped hundreds of startups, not only from India, but abroad, right? Globally, whether it is Israel, Canada, US, and few others, in improving themselves with regards to how they are running their businesses, but also figuring out synergies or entering into the Indian market, amongst many other things, right? He is a graduate from the Asian Institute of Management. He's worked with the likes of Microsoft, Dishnet, and many others. Most importantly, a lot of work around innovation, right? Corporate innovation is the way I look at it. Just to share some examples from startup founders and what they say about Amay. Amay has been a patient listener and has always helped us figure out what is the crux of the matter, right? So as a mentor, as an advisor, he helps startups understand what's the most important thing that they need to look at from a strategic standpoint. Some of the other founders that I know have said GeoGenX program has really helped us scale up, right? Through very strong POCs and integration within the Reliance ecosystem. So without further ado, I'd like to invite Amay to share his thoughts and speak a little bit on this topic. Thank you, Amay.
Thanks, Darshan. I'm just going to share my screen now and make a short presentation.
Perfect. We can see it.
All right. So thanks so much, Darshan, and thanks to Flame University for organizing this talk. So the topic of this conversation is really about, why are large companies interested in startups, right? And I just want to talk about the first principles without getting into too many details on why there is interest in startups nowadays, right? So it's a personal reflection, based on sort of several years of observing the corporate and startup engagements that have happened. So just if you take a step back and look at a large organization that is looking at new growth opportunities, there are there is a group that looks at strategy, right, which is to understand what are your core competencies, markets, competitors, products, and people. And then looks at transformation, which is to look at, are we geared as an organization to take on and sort of execute on these strategies? And then what are the levers that we have within the organization that we can use to execute on the strategy, right? So broadly speaking, if you look at any large organization, they have these three elements that they look at when it comes to growth, right? And within these levers, the first lever is obviously innovation, and innovation is internal innovation. It is R&D that has led to sort of phenomenal products over the years for large companies, right? But this is one way in which they look at addressing all the opportunities and risks in front of them when it comes to their growth, right? So if you look at innovation and you look at the kind of money that is being spent on it, it's a huge number, right? So if you look at Amazon, Alphabet, Samsung, Intel, Microsoft, Apple, they spend billions of dollars every year on R&D and internal innovation. And so not all large organizations have those kind of budgets, and it's a lot of money to spend on innovation. And therefore, if you look at the other lever that large organizations have to keep growing is mergers and acquisitions, right? But this too comes at a price. And if you thought that internal innovation is expensive, this is even more expensive, right? In some cases. So look at some of these ticket sizes like IBM, SAP, Microsoft, right? Billions of dollars are spent on merging and acquiring large tech companies. So this is another strategy that large organizations use. So the first one is innovation. The second one is M&A. And these are the two biggest levers that they have, right? But if you take a step back and look at, how large organizations, typically think about executing on growth strategies and how things have been happening so far. So there are a lot of startups who come up with new brilliant ideas and prove them in the market and start gaining traction. And these startup ideas are in a lot of cases converted into case studies, trends, and strategy by consulting firms. And then further, this strategy is converted into a service opportunity by services organizations. And then finally, large companies buy the service, right? So you can see that, there are sort of multiple levels between startup ideas and where these startup ideas land with large companies. And it's not so straightforward, right? And it's a multi-step process. But this is what was happening, let's say until a decade back, at least with the big tech. But this this route of getting new ideas into large companies is now changing, and the new route is really just buying these startups, right? Acquiring them and bringing in all the new ideas into large companies. So this is a new route that large organizations are now following. And therefore, if this is the new route, what are these large organizations looking for in startups? And here is where, I'd like to, take a small detour and talk to you about this slide, this picture. This is a movie called Ford versus Ferrari, which was released a couple of years back. And it's the story of how when Ford, was making family cars in the 60s, and they wanted to move into sort of new next generation cars, because a lot of people who had teenagers, kids, and sort of young adults in their families didn't want to really drive family cars, but they wanted something that was nicer looking, etc. So Ford wanted to change its appeal to young consumers, and the one way to do this is to get into the racing business. But in the racing business, Ferrari was the winner, and they were the winners of the biggest tournament that happened, during that time, called Le Mans. And over 5 years, they were winning that tournament. And so Ford thought that if we were to make a statement of getting into the racing business, and if we want to win the Le Mans, then we need a team that can help us win this race, right? And clearly, we don't have that team within our company. But this is absolutely essential for us to take the next jump in our evolution, right? So they went about looking for the right team, and they found these two gentlemen. So the first one is the guy next to the door is, or leaning on the door, is Matt Damon. So he plays the role of Shelby, and he has a startup called Shelby American, and he finds this other guy called Ken Miles, who actually builds like phenomenal racing cars and is also the driver of racing cars himself. And so Ford finds this team and says that, this is the team that we should bet on if we have to win this race against Ferrari, right? And so, that's the most important part, that can you find the best team that can help you win a race that you've never ever won before? And how do you make that jump? How do you pole vault into that position without, without spending years and years on internal R&D and internal efforts to get to that stage? And so that's the primary motivation for large companies to look at startups, which is the teams, right? And so if you look at some of the teams that we have been working with in Jio, we have Mbyte, which is building the next generation artificial intelligence-based education. You have Now Floats, which comes with technology expertise in the SMB market. You have Find, which brings technology to that can enhance your shopping experience, online shopping experience. There is Reverie, that brings in language technologies, which is used for speech recognition, because speech is going to be more and more important as we get into sort of connecting different ecosystems, the way customers interact with us, the way merchants interact with us. And then you have Savan, which brings in a fantastic music product, right? So these are sort of teams that have built these awesome technologies and products that we are now taking to the next level. And so at Jio, we've done more than 25 acquihires / acquisitions over the last 3 years. And, so how do these startups, once they get acquired or once they become a part of our ecosystem, transform, as products or as teams, as new businesses, right? So let me take the example of a company called Tesseract, which had built this first mixed reality headset coming out of India. Phenomenal team, had done a great job with this product. But as you can see, the product is is slightly big, but has all the functionalities that you can actually imagine, right? But it had to undergo a transformation. And so if you see the transformation of this product into what was announced recently, which is GeoGlass, it's a completely different form factor, much better in functionality, and it is affordable. It will be accessible because we have all the distribution that can make this device to get this device in the hands of consumers. It is extremely user friendly, as you can see, and therefore it becomes a scalable proposition. So a startup can come in, a team can come in with a prototype or a product, and with some traction in the market, having proven a new idea in the market, and when it gets combined with a larger company, you can actually make it into a scalable proposition, and that's the point of the slide. What matters most as teams and startups come into large organizations, one is the cultural fit. I think that is extremely important to have between startups and large companies. If there is a cultural fit, then the engagement can be long term. And like I'm saying out here that you have to think as a startup in 5 to 10 years horizon. It cannot be that I want to sell my startup and then I want to retire and go to Hawaii. It has to be more about how can I take what I've built so far and scale it up and make it widely accessible around the world. And if that is your motivation, then large companies serve as an excellent platform for you to grow to the next stage, right? The process of some of these things is simpler than it looks from outside. It invariably starts with the founder and investor expectations. It typically, in our case, as I'm saying here, Geogen Next originates a deal. And then there is a technology and a business diligence that goes on for some time, which is typically done by a corporate development unit and a technology group, etc. And then there is obviously the paperwork and then integration of the startup into the ecosystem. So it's a fairly simple process. There are several moving parts, and there are people who are extremely skilled at taking startups through this process and eventually integrating them into large companies. And this ecosystem is evolving really fast in India as well. So, having covered the first principles, I'd like to play a short video. And this is a video from the same movie that I talked about, which is Ford versus Ferrari. And in this movie, you can see Matt Damon, consider him as the co-founder of the startup Shelby American, who Ford has contracted for winning the Le Mans race. And in the first race, they don't win. And then he has a conversation with the CEO of the large organization. And in this conversation, what becomes apparent is that because there were hurdles and roadblocks, they weren't able to win the race. But the way he communicates, what needs to be done differently for them to win the race is extremely important. So it's not just important for you to bring talent and technology as a startup. Once you get integrated into a larger ecosystem, a larger company, it's extremely important to build trust, earn trust, and also receive trust of the new management in order for you to win the race. So I'm just going to play this short clip. It's about 2.5 minutes, but I think it will put things in perspective.
Give me one reason why I don't fire everyone associated with this abomination, starting with you.
Well, sir, I was thinking about that very question as I sat out there in your lovely waiting room. As I was sitting there, I watched that little red folder right there go through 4 pairs of hands before it got to you. Of course, that doesn't include the 22 or so other Ford employees who probably poked at it before it made its way up to the 19th floor. All due respect, sir, you can't win a race by committee. You need one man in charge. Now, the good news, as I see it, is that even with all the extra weight, we still managed to put old Mr. Ferrari exactly where we want him.
Did we?
Oh, yes.
Expand.
Well, sure, we haven't worked out how to corner yet, or stay cool, or stay on the ground. And a lot of stuff broke. In fact, the only thing that didn't break was the brakes. Hell, right now, we don't even know if our paint job will last a whole 24 hours. But our last lap, we clocked 218 miles an hour down the Mulsanne Straight. Now, in all his years of racing, old Enzo ain't never seen anything move that fast. And now he knows, without a doubt, we're faster than he is. Even with the wrong driver and all the committees. And that's what he's thinking about. He's sitting in Modena, Italy, right now. That man is scared to death that this year you actually might be smart enough to start trusting me. So yeah, I'd say you got Ferrari exactly where you want him. You're welcome.
Okay, great. All right, so that's what I have for you right now, and I'm happy to take any questions that you might have.
Excellent. Thank you, Amay. Just to begin, I see about 3 questions right now. For the participants, if you have any questions, please put it in Q&A. I'm happy to bring them up to Amay. Just to begin, Amay, Jio has already got or made 25 plus acquisitions, right? And the Jio ecosystem is only getting started, right? The Indian ecosystem owes a lot to corporations, right? First, it was Microsoft through the Microsoft Accelerator program in early 2012 to 2016, 2017, where they did a lot of good work with various startups. And then Jio has kind of taken it to another level, right? So India is the 3rd largest ecosystem, 70,000 odd startups, 10,000 odd tech startups, expected to quadruple in the next 5 years. How do you see large companies, outside of Reliance, coming in and contributing to this large ecosystem?
I think that's a great question, Darshan. And, we are, like you rightly said, I think we are just beginning with our engagements with startups in the Indian ecosystem. And, I can already see like a lot of phenomenal programs by other large companies, in different areas. And I think every large company brings tremendous resources and expertise that can help a startup grow to the next level. And so if you were to look at this as a horizontal platform or a horizontal platform and a vertical ecosystem. So for example, if you look at just retail, we have several interesting retail companies in the country. And so within retail, if one were to look at, how can a startup actually start adding value to our operations, and not just that, but also become a profit center for us, then the whole conversation changes, right? Because then you're not looking at a startup as a cost or a cost of an experiment that might or might not work, but really as, how can I integrate the startup and convert that into a profit center? And some companies have done this exceedingly well. Um, Take, for example, the whole manufacturing industry, right? And yesterday I was, talking to a colleague from another corporate who are looking at engaging with startups, but on the industrial IoT side of things. And there are interesting possibilities out there as well with things like digital twins, etc. And there, corporates can bring in a lot of muscle in terms of data, in terms of the scale at which you can actually test things. uh, and that is really just beginning to happen in the ecosystem, and I think it will increase over time. uh, the one thing that corporates should do is to collaborate, and I think in non-conflicting situations, obviously, but uh, in the whole tech world, it's all about co-opetition, right? It's not just competition, but it's collaboration and competition. So the more collaboration you see within large corporates in India, the faster the ecosystem will grow.
Excellent. Now, when we were working and I was heading programs at GeoGen Next, we spoke extensively, but I thought this platform could benefit from this question. Reliance Industries operates at a scale which is scary, to say the least, right? It is that large, right? It has huge presence. Even if you just take Reliance Retail, we are talking about 3,000 plus stores, amongst many others, right? So when a startup, which even may be well funded and by itself, it might be growing pretty fast, multifold in a year, what will it take for a startup such as that to work with Reliance at the scale that Reliance operates? Maybe if you can share some thoughts and some maybe experiences of some of the startups of how a startups can build, prove, and then get to operate at that scale.
Yeah, I think I can think of a couple of examples of startups that have worked with us. The first example that I can think of is a company called Intello Labs. And Intello Labs was, so early when they came into the program. They literally just had a prototype and they had a different idea of using their product. So they essentially, in a nutshell, they use computer vision to do sorting and grading of fruits and vegetables. And computer vision was fairly new, like 3 years back, right? Not many startups were using it, but applications were just coming out. So what we told them is that, okay, great, computer vision is great, but how do you sort of apply that to a real world problem? And so we took it to our retail team, and our retail team was fantastic, and they immediately saw the potential in it and said that, okay, we can use computer vision in our, warehouses and our retail stores to do, quality assessment of, fruits and vegetables. And let's start with, one or two uh, one or two commodities, and then we can expand from there. And that's how they got started. And we gave them a proof of concept, and then they proved that proof of concept over like about 6 months or so, for actually the real data to come back to us saying that, okay, this is actually working. The computer vision technology is working to actually sort out these commodities properly. So that was the first proof point. And then from there, to actually prove commercial value of what these guys were doing, took another 6 months. So it's clearly a long-term 1 year journey for you to bring any new technology into the market and prove it at some scale. And once they were able to do that, obviously there were other big retailers who approached them, and now they are with 3 or 4 large retailers around the world, and they just closed their Series A funding as well. So that's typically the journey of a startup, when they partner with a larger organization like Reliance.
I remember Himani and the team, right, going through the program, and such an awesome tech team, amazing technology background, but really the commercial or the business side of the startup, and to operate it at scale. I thought that was a huge value addition for them.
Absolutely.
Great. So here's a question from Bhavin Mehta. Technology startups are get a lot of limelight, rightly so. But how do startups engaged in manufacturing, differ from startups engaged in services, and the way you look at them, right? Or a large company may look at them. So maybe some examples within the manufacturing space.
So just going back to, for example, in the manufacturing space, one of the recent examples that I've looked at, which is very interesting, is quality inspection, and where you use again computer vision to do quality inspection at on an assembly line or a packaging line, and that quality inspection previously was done manually. Now it's done by then it moved from completely manual to actually a person actually observing something on a screen, to now the algorithm actually detecting the quality of the product that's moving through the assembly line. And so uh, the way a startup differs from a traditional manufacturing or a services company is that, think of manufacturing and a services company as a platform, which is already well established. It has established processes, established ways of doing things. What a startup really does is to come in and change the game, right? Make you 10x or 100x more productive, more efficient by the use of technology, and that's why it has a non-linear path. And so therefore, while we would like to see more SMEs and more services companies actually growing, uh, if you don't figure out ways to partner with startups or to become a startup yourself by the use of technology, the transformation into getting non-linear growth is like very, very difficult, right? And that's where a technology startup really differs.
Absolutely. Excellent. Here's a question from Dhaval Jobanputra, right? There's a lot of, given that startup investment has mostly become more of a valuation game, at the time of acquisition, does the valuation in general justify the acquisition? I'm going to broaden that just a little bit, right? We are talking about valuation and we're talking about acquisition. And this becomes or continues to become one big challenge. 2020 with COVID-19, we are seeing a lot of startups pulled up who may have raised a significant amount of money. So at the time of exit, at the time of acquisition and the investors, how does valuation come into picture? And can you share some thoughts?
So, and this is really something that is on a case-to-case basis, and not necessarily something that we follow. But what I've seen happening is, from a financial investment point of view, I think the valuations typically, if the company is growing like really well, the valuations keep growing, and so the language of valuing your business is always based on, okay, here is my pre-money valuation, so much investment, and this is my post-money, etc., etc. And that kind of investment approach is typically valid when you're looking at that value sort of happening in the future, right? It's not the current value of your company, but it is based on future projections and the potential of what you can achieve, right? So fundamentally, acquisitions work differently, where there are a couple of situations. One is, if the company is growing really fast and you want to acquire that company because you want to be part of that growth process, then valuation is different, and perhaps you can look at some of the principles that are laid down by financial investors and look at it that way. But if the situation is where you've run your course, the market has changed, like you said, COVID has changed the dynamics right now. Um, but excellent team, excellent product, great traction, but you don't know how to value your past efforts where you are today, uh, then the conversation is slightly different. It's not based on pre-money valuation, but it's based on, uh, it's based on the buyer's perception of the value, right? Which can be fundamentally very, very different. But without getting into specifics, I would say that acquisitions typically follow very different principles from a financial investment kind of a principle.
Absolutely. And being realistic, right, as a founding team. And to each person, it seems what I've created is probably the best, right? But understanding the market, understanding the realities, knowing where the startup stands, and what is the value, going forward, is also an important parameter. That can be a complete different webinar by itself, right?
Yeah,
that we
true.
can talk about. Now, here's a question from Abhimanyu, who looks like he's operating in an edtech startup. What would you look for in an edtech startup that are keen to join the GeoGenNext program? And I'll just broaden that a little bit. Maybe you could also add a little bit about what are the current, the Basecamp program, and how does it work, and when are the applications due, amongst many other things.
Okay, sure. So let me start with the second part and then come back to EdTech. So GeoGenNext is a mentoring and an engagement program with startups. And we typically run this for 3 months, every four months. So we have 3 batches a year, and we take 10 to 11 startups in every batch. And these are typically B2B in nature. Like 70-80% of them are either B2B or B2B2C. Because in our case, we are the B2C with our consumer businesses, which are retail and geo, right? So we are obviously looking for technology value adds in our ecosystem, as opposed to getting into a new B2C line of business. Having said that, today I think deep tech is the sort of flavor of the month, or flavor of the year. And so this year we are going to pretty much focus on deep tech. Having said that, if you look at industry verticals, all these are super important: ed tech, health tech, agri tech, fintech. All these are extremely important verticals for us. But what is the core differentiation that you have as a team or as a product, right? And I don't necessarily know about this particular education company, but if you could share my email ID, with the audience, I'm happy to look at companies on a case-to-case basis.
Excellent. Thanks a lot for that, Amay. Here's Monica. I was speaking with Monica just yesterday. She runs a startup accelerator program in Singapore to connect corporates with startups for a non-profit organization. So her question is, what is the one criteria which you would use to differentiate between 2 similar startups? Considering you're going to take only 10 to 12 startups in a cohort, if within the same space you see 2 different startups, how do you look at them and how do you go about selecting them?
Generally speaking, in a cohort, we try and avoid taking very similar startups. But, for example, in the current batch, we have 2 startups that are tackling the same problem, but they're tackling it in different ways, right? Which is very interesting for us to look at, because as a large company, as a corporate, we can try out both approaches and see which one works for us. But having said that, I think the way we look at it is, one, what is the differentiation between, what startup A is doing versus startup B is doing in their approach to solving a particular problem that we're looking at. And B, what is the traction that they've had so far, with respect to customers. And we generally prefer if a startup has at least engaged in a pilot or a proof of concept with a large company. Of course, this is not the rule, but if there is a situation like that, then we would prefer that kind of a startup over somebody who's really coming to us with an MVP and saying that, okay, I'm going to prove it for the first time in your ecosystem, which is a harder problem to solve for the startup and for us as well as a program.
So here's Gautam Reddy linked on the last part that you mentioned. What stage does GeoGenNext consider? At what stage should a startup consider reaching out to GeoGenNext? What's the sweet spot? And then are there any exceptions?
Yeah, so I think the basic answer is that any stage. You can be at any stage because just the scope and the scale of our ecosystem is massive. And so if you're sort of at an MVP or a prototype level, but you have some like really deep expertise in deep domain expertise in your industry, then we would love to talk to you to see how we can bring your product to life, much the example that I talked about earlier. But if you're late stage, which is, you've done your whatever Series A, Series B, etc., we can, I mean, there is a very small component of mentoring in that kind of an engagement, and it's more about how we can engage in evaluating your product commercially and seeing where it fits in within our ecosystem. So you can come to us at any stage, and we have a way to work with anybody actually, and we've designed that as a skill set.
Excellent. And so now that is regarding the stage. Regarding the verticals, right? There's one question here which says, do you look at ag tech, agriculture technology, or healthcare technology, and some of the other verticals? So what may be some of the key focus areas or verticals that you may be looking at where startups can reach out to you?
Yeah. So I think fundamentally you can look at it as, in two parts. So one is sort of a horizontal technology layer. And there we are interested in many of the buzzwords of today, but, many of the interesting technologies like artificial intelligence, machine learning, IoT, both consumer and industrial, mixed reality, blockchain, uh, SaaS, computer vision. All these technologies are super interesting because we can apply them to, multiple areas within our organization. But if you look at the vertical industries, uh, all these industries are interesting, like healthcare. Wherever technology can be used to transform a traditional sector is very interesting for us. So if you look at healthcare, agriculture, financial services, education, manufacturing, service like media and entertainment, all these are very interesting verticals for us to look at.
Excellent. Now, here's a question from Abhimanyu. Reliance runs GeoGenNext, but does it also run or partner with other corporate innovation programs?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think there are phenomenal corporate innovation and corporate innovation programs and corporate accelerators today, run by extremely talented people, and we love to partner and we love to share ideas and share deal flow as far as startups is concerned, even collaborate on joint problem solving. That's absolutely in our mandate. And these engagements are largely relationship and trust based. There are no formal structures for such kind of partnerships, but I think it's phenomenal that most of the large companies are now focusing on how startups can drive their innovation. So we seek to partner with all of them.
Here's a question from Jihan Kotwal, and this is both with regards to Reliance and you and Shri Dr. Mashilkar, because you are heavily involved in social entrepreneurship as well, right? So how interested is Geo in social venture startups? I want to broaden that question just a little bit and stretch it even to you and Dr. Mashilkar. How do you look at social ventures? How can they approach you? Where can you help them, amongst many other things?
So fundamentally, when we look at social ventures, which is for profit, obviously, um, uh, I think we've engaged with a number of them that are working with different communities in the country, and a lot of these startups actually uh, end up collaborating with our foundation, which looks at non-profit initiatives on where technology can be used to, uh, help different communities that the foundation is involved in. But yeah, I mean, over the years, there are several examples of, folks that we worked in the healthcare space, in agriculture, and seeing how they can leverage our network to make a difference. So we are extremely open, and just write to me if you have an idea, and we'll sort of evaluate it and see what we can do with it.
Excellent. Now, we do have some students and aspiring entrepreneurs as well who are still at an ideation stage. I know Reliance, through the TUP, the ultimate pitch, a lot of entrepreneurial ideas are given a lot of help through the Reliance ecosystem, right? But is there a mechanism by which students and aspiring entrepreneurs who may be at ideation stage, for example, an application model is what Aram has given. Of course, we'd like to learn more, but someone at that stage, do you have a program for them? How can they reach out to you? What can they do?
I think if you're in the content or the app space, and if you're looking at B2C, then you should definitely look at the Geo Developers Program, which has the following URL. So it's developers.geo.com, and if you have an app, or some interesting content, uh, you can just write to us through the Geo Developers Program, and we can see how we can integrate you on the GeoPhone or the Geo set-top box, etc. In fact, we did a very extensive session just last week with the Geo Developers Program team to look at how startups and developers can work with us. Um, I think that is one way to go about it if you're extremely early, and that way you can even quickly get to some scale and also test out your product with a large user base. That's one way to go about it. If you're B2B, then we would love to hear from you directly as Geogen Next, because B2B is normally about having worked in an organization, sensed a problem, cannot solve it within that organization, stepping out, starting a startup to solve that problem, and selling the product back to the organization that you work for. I think that's been the typical route to starting a B2B tech company. And so if you're doing something like that, we'd love to hear from you at Geogen Next as well.
Excellent. So here's a question from Lakshmi and Bhavamanyu, which I think are related to COVID-19. COVID-19 has adversely impacted businesses, not just the startups, but SMEs, MSMEs, the large companies as well, right? So in this situation, how does a startup work with a large company? And the way large companies look at startups or they are chosen, has that changed? Is there a parameter that has changed? So for example, not enough funding, not enough cash flow, runway. Does that come into picture or does it not come into picture as yet?
I don't think it really matters to us. The cash flow position today, due to what has happened during COVID, has not adversely impacted our selection process or our engagement with startups. What we look for is like I talked about in my presentation, is exceptional teams. And if you build something that's truly different, and if you've been able to get some traction for it, even pre-COVID, that would be very interesting for us to look at. But I don't think having being impacted by COVID really would make things different for us. I think we're still the same program, and our criteria pretty much remain the same.
Excellent. Now, here's a question from Kiran Deshpande. Does a startup meet organic business of the big company? How can a startup select between two big companies? So what I'm assuming the question over here is, uh, if there are two large companies with a startup looking at those two to proceed, is there an either or choice that comes through, or it can be both? Are there limitations that you put to startups?
There is no limitation at all. In fact, and if the startup is engaging with another large corporate, and they also approach us, it's in fact a good validation for us that that somebody else is looking at the startup as well. So I don't see that as a problem. Uh, the only thing that could happen is if there is some conflicting situation where the startup is actually uh, engaged with a direct competitor, and that could be the only conflicting situation that I can think of. But other than that, I don't see this as a problem.
Here's one question on acquisitions. May not be acquisition, but rather strategic investment. Does Reliance look at taking minority stake, or is it always a majority stake? And what kind of decision-making process takes place for acquisition?
Yeah, so I think it's all on a case-to-case basis. We've done, we've done minority investments, we've done majority, uh, and so there is really no limitation of that kind. It just depends on what the opportunity is, and why we need to look at a minority investment as opposed to an acquisition. Uh, but generally speaking, I mean, I just want to zoom out and talk about corporates in general, because it's not just in our context, but corporates in general. Um, I see a good mix of both happening, minority as well as majority. But the minority investment ecosystem within corporate venturing and corporates still has to evolve quite a bit. Uh, I think what happens is that corporates prefer to acquire a startup or a company, because then they can integrate them into their roadmap fully, and therefore continue on their growth path that way. Whereas a minority investment, other than understanding what the startup is doing and being on the board and getting some regular reports, uh, really doesn't serve any other purpose. Uh, and for a large corporate, maybe the financial returns from a startup investment is less important than what they can get strategically out of the company or the team. So I think this is still an open debate, and I think things will evolve. But you can achieve some of these things through minority investments as well, but it's harder to do that.
Excellent. So we're kind of come to the end of our session. Amay, this has been an absolutely brilliant session. Some really good questions. Thanks a lot for your questions. Thank you for your time. Amay, really appreciate you coming and sharing your thoughts and experience, and how startups could engage. Your email ID has been shared on the chat. For anyone who may be interested, definitely go look up GeoGenNext, right, and apply for their programs. It's very specific questions. Reach out to Amay in various capacities, how you think there could be potential synergies. So please go ahead on that. For the next session on Saturday, we have a session on how and when to do business plans. While a business plan becomes redundant as soon as it is made because of moving dynamic variables, the process of business planning is very, very important for the founder or the founding team. And Advait Kurlekar, who's the CEO of Upohan Management Consultant, he's a TiE charter member, and has conducted this session multiple times. It has been really well received by various early stage startups. So if you or anybody who wants to understand why, when, how to create your business plan, please log in on Saturday 5 to 6 p.m. Again, Amay, thanks a lot for your time, and looking forward to seeing GeoGenNext, spread its wings.
Thanks, Darshan. And one thing I must say is that you're a dear friend now, but it's always been wonderful to collaborate with you. And I really miss the time that we used to work together at GeoGen Next. But you have a huge role to play in where we are as a program and our presence in the ecosystem. So thank you for that. Thank you for inviting me out here today, and look forward to hearing your feedback on the session. Thanks.
We'll do that. We'll do that. Stay safe, everyone, and see you soon. Take care.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye.